Hello and welcome back to this downful idealistic crusade. This will be the latest in my Laserdisc Collection videos, and to be quite honest, this will be the biggest one I've ever done in terms of just general collection updates. These were all just completely, I would say generously donated or sent to me, but to say that this person was merely generous is an understatement. So this video is entirely due to Jason Koestner, who sent me not just some things on my wish list or some things that I've always wanted to try, but some discs that I simply thought I would never actually own in my collection or have, or some things I never thought I'd try because they're just very much up there in the rareability and high up on the collection wish list. So this was basically like Christmas morning, getting boxes in the mail and not necessarily knowing what was inside there. So he said he would send me a few Star Wars things, which was awesome because I'm always looking for other editions to try, and I've wanted to make an update to my Star Wars on Laserdisc video, and now I definitely am already in the process of doing that because now I have far more materials that in terms of Laserdisc editions that I just never thought I would get to try out. And then inside those and another box he sent me were things that were total shocks and surprises, and one in particular I just did not expect, and I think I was speechless for most of the day actually when I got it. For those who have seen the Laserdisc Wolfpack episodes or some of the latest ones, or follow me on Twitter, you'll know what I'm alluding to, but I'm saving that for last. But to get into these again, this is just a whole bunch of Laserdisc titles that you just never see. They're all on the rare side, and some have been atop my wish list ever since I actually got into Laserdisc collecting. So without further ado, let's jump into these, and I'll start with with actually a Criterion title. So this is Spine 298, which is, of course, the 7 Special Edition CAV box set. This is one of the most notable Criterion boxes, and, of course, contains the original CCE print transfer done for the original video releases. This seems to be the same master as what's on the standalone standard CLV release that I have, but after this point, for the DVDs and onwards, they used differing sources and have done different video masters to try and either approximate the CCE look of the bleach bypassed theatrical release prints, and most versions don't really approximate that. And once they got into the HD realm, even with director supervision, they're kind of all over the place. So the Laserdiscs are important for a sort of baked-in 1995-96 video appearance, and it is at least getting you more of an approximation, at least in the video realm, of what composite could do at the time of that bleach bypass CCE theatrical release print. But this is a huge deluxe Criterion box set loaded with extras and, of course, beautiful custom packaging. This is one of the most beautiful custom packages they ever did. And the thing is, when this pops up, it's not particularly a rare disc, but it doesn't pop up all the time. But everyone I've ever seen has been very expensive and beat to crap, and usually the box is the first thing to go, particularly since it's one of these that's a hinge box. So this still has the hinge intact. And here is the beautiful insert, which is very, very intricate. This whole front panel is literally a note to the viewer about the CCE process and how to properly watch this Laserdisc, how to set your display, and to even compare the difference between the CCE print look and then some straight negative shots that were used for the deleted scenes gallery. And you can actually compare the two and see the difference that the bleach bypassing approach gave to the final release version as intended. This is, of course, a beautiful gatefold. It's on a really sturdy and very nice cardstock. It's not like a little paper leaflet type. It's nice and sturdy. But again, the design is so intricate on this, and you do have to kind of look all around and hunt to try and make sure where all the text is going. But of course, it perfectly fits the style and tone of the film. Then we come to the discs themselves, and they have this really nice custom Criterion label on all of them. Of course, the film is full CAV, so that means you're going to be flipping sides quite often. Of course, this is loaded with extras, so to give you the tech credits, it has in full CAV a new scope 235:1 widescreen digital transfer supervised by David Fincher. The sound is credited as a new surround mix supervised by sound designer Ren Claes, optimized for home theater listening, and then also a discrete AC3 5.1 soundtrack. So I don't know how much different this may be from the original theatrical release audio, but I'm sure it's probably the same audio, just like the transfer is shared with the standard CLV non-deluxe release. But it should be pretty similar, I would say, to the theatrical audio. But since this does say credited as optimized for home theater listening, I'm sure maybe just some light sweetening and probably some other things were involved, but it shouldn't be too terribly much. Then the audio commentary on Analog Track 1 is with David Fincher, Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt, screenwriter Andrew Kevin Walker, production designer Arthur Max, and Rob Bottin, a guru of makeup effects. And this is still, of course, a Criterion exclusive. Then we go into the extensive supplemental features, which include everything from deleted scenes, outtakes, and dailies to crime scene photographs, tons of production design, sketches, and storyboards, an entire study of the opening credit sequence. Rob Bottin does a visual essay with commentary. Then there's the entire pieces entitled The Killer's Photographs and The Killer's Diaries, plus a enormously extensive stills section with hundreds and hundreds of stills. And on top of that, there's an entire trailer gallery with the trailer and then all of the television ads and various other spots. So this is the big deluxe presentation of Seven. If you want one version to own of this film on Laserdisc, it would obviously be this Criterion release. The standalone version does seem to share the same transfer and the 5.1 mix along with the ProLogic Dolby Surround. So if you just want the film and you want to see that CCE print look, how it looked like on Laserdisc at least, then and you don't want to spring for the box, you can get the standalone. There is a DTS variant as well of the standalone, but that's usually much more expensive and things. But neither of those have the deluxe Criterion presentation. Also, again, this is in full CAV, so this does have the best picture quality. And again, I'm so happy to finally be able to dig into the actual, I guess, sort of legendary Criterion 7 box. I've seen it before. I have the standalone, so I've seen the transfer before, but I'm very curious to see what the full CAV version looks like, and now to finally look at all of the Criterion extras where they originated on the Criterion box. And again, this is the first time I've seen one that isn't beat to absolute crap and doesn't, actually has the spine still intact. So that's usually the trickiest part of finding one of these. First, not super expensive, trying to find one that isn't marked up in terms of price, and then second, try to find one that isn't literally beat to crap. Then he said he would send me some DTS titles, and I'm like, oh, cool. Anytime I can get DTS, that's great. But I pretty much resigned myself to just getting DTS titles when they pop up in the wild or when one happens to be on eBay and it's not crazy expensive or something. So most of my DTS titles I've gotten have just been lucky finds, or the ones that pop up every once in a while between $10 and $20, and the others I've kind of resigned myself to probably not ever really getting around to, because I didn't like the idea of spending the money they go for now on a disc. So I assumed it would be like when I've traded some DTS discs with people, just spares or duplicates I might find, or trades and different things. But he sent me some titles I have really always wanted to check out, starting with the DTS presentation of Casino. So this is the Universal reissue. Universal, I guess, famously in video circles was, obviously Spielberg backed DTS and Universal went DTS. And then on Laserdisc, that meant there were no Dolby Digital releases at first. So they were still ProLogic surround only in terms of they had a digital track, but no 5.1. Then Universal started releasing DTS titles, starting with Jurassic Park and The Shadow. So all of the DTS pressings are later, so they are obviously harder to come by because they were pressed in smaller batches. They look almost the same as the standard releases, just with the DTS banner and the catalog numbers being a little different. And of course, you have the DTS info on the back cover in terms of the actual blurb is a little bit different. See if I can get that to focus. That's telling you about DTS and everything. Otherwise, it looks exactly the same as the standard pressing. Most DTS titles, in terms of the actual picture master, it's sort of a mixed bag. Some had new transfers like the Shadow, some didn't. They just reused the old ones. But because they were much later pressings, usually 97, 98 and beyond, the picture quality is actually improved because it's a better pressing. I really love Casino. It's one of my favorite Scorsese films. I think it's very underrated, and I love the sound design just as much as the really intricate photography of the film. And I really do like the standard Laserdisc release with just the Dolby Surround. That's been a disc I've always had kicking around as sort of a test disc. Every once in a while, if I'm changing something or trying something, I can throw on like side 2 or side 3 of Casino and see how it's doing. I just always wish it had an AC3 track or something. Well, this really does wipe the floor with that, because this has the full DTS experience. And I haven't gotten the 4K release of this yet, so I need to get that, and I want to just compare everything from Laserdisc onward. This film, again, has a very stylistic approach, so that doesn't necessarily play well with home video transfers. It has to be transferred very carefully. I think the Laserdisc does do a really great job, and I do think the DTS actually does have a better picture presentation than even the standard one. But I do need to sit down and do a direct head-to-head, frame-by-frame comparison of the two releases, just to satisfy my own curiosity between the two. I've just done, some basic ones, but this has a phenomenal track, and I'm so happy to finally have one of my favorite Scorsese films on its best Laserdisc presentation with the DTS track. Next is a title I've always wanted to compare. This one has been discussed ad nauseum, it seems, in various forums and even in Laserdisc Forever as to which version of this film has the best soundtrack, and there are many different options, but I've never been able to compare all the various releases to the DTS, and now I can do that. So I was very happy that he sent me the DTS of Independence Day. And something else I didn't even notice until I actually took it out and started looking at it is someone has autographed this. I'm not exactly sure who that is, but apparently this was to Mark at some point, and I'm not sure who that is. So I didn't even notice that because the writing is so small that at first it didn't even dawn on me until I'm like, hey, wait a minute. So that's a really nice bonus. The actual jacket's a little dinged up here and there, but that's actually kind of common for DTS disc because this has a very glossy jacket sleeve, and the actual usually on DTS titles, they're actually a little bit thinner than their standard counterparts. So if you had this next to the AC3 presentation on Laserdisc, the jackets look the same in terms of the art, but you'll notice the DTS is actually a little bit thinner and the jacket's a little glossier. This still has the same gatefold, of course. This has a little bit of wear inside, but still looks really nice. And of course, this was printed a little bit later, so it's the same jacket-wise, except once again we have the DTS info there. So I'm really looking forward to firing this up and comparing the sounds to the AC3 pressing, which already sounds fantastic. The mix on this thing is great, even if the movie is wholeheartedly aiming for a more goofy vibe throughout. So I think that's why it's so beloved amongst its many fans, that it sort of goes for that it knows what it is type feeling. But the sound mix is extraordinarily bombastic, so now I can't wait to compare the AC3 to this DTS pressing. He also sent me what is easily, I think, the best Michael Bay picture, as of course The Rock, with the same art and design as the standard release, but with the beautiful black DTS banner across the top. This is, again, it's just one of the most fun summer films of the 90s, but it does have a bit of a brain to it, and of course it's for spy nerds because it has Connery in it, going at full Connery gusto in ways that not many films of his later career really got him to do. So it's always wonderful to come back to this. And again, I think it is the best Michael Bay picture in terms of not being as brain dead as a lot of his later stuff, and having an actual narrative through line, and again having the spy elements mixed in with the bombastic action set pieces. And it is really stepping up his game over the success of the first Bad Boys. So it sort of had, you can see that sort of direct line, and of course being under the Jerry Bruckheimer banner, that makes this technically a Disney disc in disguise, even though this has the THX seal of approval, and of course this is the DTS pressing, so you get the DTS info there. Otherwise, it does look exactly the same as the standard AC3 pressing. So I have various releases of this, including the Blu-ray and the AC3 LD. So I'm going to fire this up and see how the DTS stacks up, because this mix is great, and I really am excited to see how this looks, because other Bruckheimer films with DTS pressings can be really something. Like the DTS pressing of Con Air is a phenomenal LD, and actually better than the standard release and in the picture transfer, let alone the really stellar DTS track. So I'm really looking forward to comparing The Rock on the DTS presentation. Speaking of directors and my favorite pictures of theirs, everybody knows I'm not really a Tarantino fan, but there is one Tarantino picture that I think is truly great, and that is Jackie Brown. And I have the standard AC3 pressing, I have the DVD deluxe edition, I have the Blu-ray, and I always have wanted to check out the DTS pressing. So I am so happy to finally have this and check that box off. I already thought the standard LD looked great. This is getting on later in the LD era anyway. But the trouble with Tarantino is a lot of his films, particularly Pulp Fiction and even Jackie Brown to some degree, but a lot of his films on disc, once you got to the Blu-ray realm, he seems to always want to play around with the transfers a little bit, particularly in terms of color and even sound. Sometimes I think the sound gets messed around with here and there. So this is an example of one of those films where you kind of don't know exactly how it's supposed to look, because it has been sort of messed with here and there over the years in terms of especially the color saturation. So it is very interesting to go back and look at the earlier releases. And this was actually his first film that was actually in the digital sound era that was released that way, because Pulp Fiction was still a lower budgeted release, and that was actually Dolby SR. The 5.1 mixes you have on disc starting in the LD era and DVD era, those are actually remixes. So this was the first Tarantino picture that was actually released in 5.1 discrete. And so I'm now going to be able to compare the AC3 LD directly to the DTS presentation. This is still a Disney disc in disguise because it's Miramax, and so you have all the Disney blurbage, and it looks exactly the same to what you get on the standard release, except for the DTS blurb on the front with the logo, and then, of course, on the back there. So if you're after the DTS pressing, it is at least, rather obvious that, you have to get this one. But this is still much less common than the standard AC3 pressing, and I'm very curious to see how the DTS stacks up against the AC3 and especially the Blu-ray audio as well. And then last for the DTS titles, this is without question the number one DTS disc on my wish list, and I couldn't believe that he just decided to send me this, and I'm so happy. If those who know me or see me on the Wolfpack podcast or have ever seen any of my stuff or read any things I've ever written on blogs and things, you would know that I have a Ronin obsession. So I can't believe he sent me this. This is, of course, the DTS presentation of John Frankenheimer's masterpiece, 1998's Ronin, which for me is my favorite film of the past 30 years, easily. This is a film for spy nerds, for die-hard spy fiction nerds, and, of course, a film designed entirely for car enthusiasts with several of the greatest car chases ever filmed. In fact, particularly the final chase is literally right there with Bullitt and the French Connection. There's no comparison. But it is an extraordinarily complex and still enjoyable, it's hard to describe. It's usually described as just an action thriller or an action spy thriller, but it's so much more than that in terms of its deep nuances, and it seems very simple on the surface, but this is one of those films that you come back to multiple times, and you're peeling the layers of the onion away. It's a film that never ceases to have something additional there in terms of an additional layer that you hadn't considered before in terms of the plot or the characters, and it is a bit labyrinthine that way. It's designed that way on purpose. It's supposed to be a bit challenging in all the best sorts of ways, and this was really a career comeback for Frankenheimer, who had a number of successes in television in the 90s, sort of going back to where he started in the golden age of television in the 50s. And so he was coming back into features, and after the debacle of Island of Dr. Moreau that he sort of walked into, and the television successes, he came out swinging with this, and then unfortunately after this wound up making Reindeer Games, which was compromised by Miramax, and then unfortunately passed away before he could really continue this streak that he was on. But he also started doing a lot of participation in releases in terms of doing audio commentaries. So he has a phenomenal commentary track, which is on the Laserdisc and the DVDs and beyond. It was done for the LD, and that is included here as well. So you do get the nice little bonuses that credited as a special edition on the AC3 pressing. Those are still here, and of course Frankenheimer's commentary, which you get that nice little info box there telling you that this does indeed have the commentary. This is the DTS pressing, so you get the DTS blurb. Otherwise, it does look the same as the standard AC3 pressing, which itself is a pretty late disc and not easy to find, but the DTS is far, far harder to get, and I have been outbid on it so many times, and or lost out or had an auction that went way above my budget at the time. So I considered myself lucky to have the standard pressing. So now that I have the DTS, I'm just like... So I think the only release I don't own of Ronin, besides the 4K release that hasn't been put out yet, although it's in the works, I think the only release I don't have is the UMD release, because it randomly got a UMD release. I saw it once in the store, and I was tempted to buy it simply because it was Ronin, and I have problems. But if you've never seen this film, please stop whatever you're doing and go and see it now. It is one of the great films, period. I think it's one of the best films of the 90s, without question. It's one of Frankenheimer's masterpieces. I can't I can't laud it enough, and it's one of those films that it pains me that so many people just sort of write off, or they saw it once, or they saw it on late night cable or something, and that was kind of it. But this is one of those films that if once you get it, if you get it and you love it, you really, really love it. And I'm so excited to have the DTS. I have thrown this on, of course, I had to. The picture transfer is phenomenal, just like the AC3 pressing, but as usual with DTS tracks, the DTS is just, it is so much more forceful, and the presence is so much greater. Of course, the size of the track itself in digital terms is far beyond the seemingly puny 384 kilobits per second of AC3 on Laserdisc. But I need to do a direct comparison with this and the especially the Blu-ray releases, particularly the Arrow, because they went back, and it's in lossless HDMA and 24-bit, and they also included the stereo surround that's on the standard Laserdisc. But I need to do a direct comparison. I'm trying to figure out a good way to actually try and capture DTS tracks so I can look at them in a waveform editor, because it's usually a lot easier to do head-to-head comparisons. Usually what I'm having to do in real-world terms is have two players going and jump back and forth and stuff, but that's I think I'm gonna have to do that anyway. Yeah, I can't. I just love this film so much, and this is an incredible LD. I'm not entirely sure yet if this is the best audio presentation overall. They all sound great. It's thankfully never been messed with in terms of audio, but I might give this the edge over the Arrow Blu-ray just slightly. I don't know why exactly, but I need to do a more detailed comparison before I can just declare one better than any of the others. Now to move on to box sets and other things. This is something I never thought I would actually wind up looking at. It is one of those wonderful Japanese trilogy box sets that, while it's not technically necessary to have because it is just repackaging the three films that you have here in the US, but with much fancier packaging. This is one of the nicer ones because it does include a bonus disc with very rare and hard to get material as a nice supplement, and it's also beautifully packaged. So this is without question, really, the best and most deluxe packaging for any release of these films. It's not very elaborate in terms of, it's not, a big fold out box or things, but it's also got that sort of beautiful, elegant simplicity to it as well, that it looks good in photos, but actually getting it in your hands is something entirely different. So I am so just bowled over by the wonderful, beautiful simplicity of the Indiana Jones trilogy box set from CIC Video in Japan. We didn't get a box set here in the US, but in Japan they did. And this has a beautiful sort of leatherette feel. It literally is embossed and everything. It has the Paramount and Lucasfilm logos on it. It has this wonderful obi strip that you can remove, but it kind of looks like sort of a bookmark almost. And I guess they were trying to make it look like a book volume because the spine literally looks like one of those fancy Easton Press type hardcover volumes that you pull off the shelf. This is literally trying to look like an archival volume in a museum because it does belong in a museum. And then the back has the titles embossed and the basic credits. The sides are kind of die cut, so you can actually very easily get your fingers on the jackets and slide the discs in and out. Now, the transfers themselves and the discs themselves do seem to be based on the widescreen releases here. So the jackets are the same type design with the beautiful, iconic original poster artwork. And then they have a nice sort of parchment background. In terms of the color printing, is very good, but these are a little bit more saturated than what we have on the US releases. That does seem to be something relatively common to a lot of Japanese pressings, that sometimes the jackets will be a little bit more saturated in color. And then, of course, you have the Paramount logo in the corner, like a lot of Paramount releases in Japan got. The rear is also carrying over the same design with a lot of stills. We have just a single CLV disc, so this does follow after the US widescreen release, but this has a much fancier style gatefold in terms of it. It's not just in the standard US Paramount letterbox design. Then the actual disc label is the traditional sort of CIC Video blue. So if you've seen a number of these, that's what most of them look like. This does have Dolby Surround encoded PCM, and it does seem to be a port of the US disc with its amazing stereo surround mix that I love so much. So again, it's just basically the US disc with a fancier custom box jacket. The same goes for Temple of Doom, which has the beautiful Drew Struzan theatrical poster art. You can see it definitely seems a bit more saturated for sure, but it's carrying over the same design with the Paramount logo. The rear has a matching lovely design loaded with stills, another CLV only single disc with Dolby Surround stereo, which should be the same really punchy, fantastic audio that's on the US LD release of the widescreen master. Then Last Crusade gets a gatefold presentation. Again, the beautiful original poster art, a little bit more saturated with the Paramount logo. The rear keeps the same matching design with lovely stills, but this has three sides, so of course you get a lovely gatefold, which has lovely photos with some color tinting to them, as a lot of Japanese gatefolds will do. But again, really nicely done. This is the one film of the set where I do think you are going to get more of a benefit with the Japanese release. These were done in 1993, some years after the US releases, but Last Crusade didn't have a nicer presentation like the first two. Last Crusade came out in widescreen on LD first, and when you watch the US LDs, Last Crusade does have, in terms of picture quality, it is the least good looking of the three because it's a little bit older, and they never did a fancier or better presentation. Also, some runs of the US disc can have a little bit of speckling and things. That think necessarily it can do laser rot, but I do know my first copy I ever had did have some speckling in areas. So this being 1993 and in Japan, the actual pressing is a little bit better than the US original release, simply because that's an older disc. It does seem to be the same master, though, and it does have the same Dolby Surround track as the LD release, and it's still a phenomenal sounding track, even though this did have discrete and 70mm presentations, just like all three in the trilogy did. But Last Crusade was, a bit further ahead in terms of really newer sound technologies, and of course Dolby Stereo SR as well, or spectral recording processing. So it is really nice to be able to have a slightly nicer pressing of the Laserdisc release than what you get on the standard US version. So of the three films, I think Last Crusade benefits the most from this Japanese box set, simply because it's a later pressing. It's a little bit better than the US ones, whereas the first two films do seem to be basically the Japanese equivalent of what we have in the US. Now we come to the exclusive bonus part of the disc, which is a fourth disc that actually gives you both of the rare vintage documentaries. So this is the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was only done as a promotional piece, and then eventually got a Laserdisc release with analog-only sound that's very rare and hard to come by, and they didn't always want to seem to port this documentary over for the bonus features on later releases. So it's very hard to come by most of the time, and this release actually adds PCM audio, so it's a better presentation than the rare and expensive US Laserdisc. However, it does have hard-coded Japanese subtitles, so you will have to deal with that. It is, of course, 4x3. It was a lot of on-set footage and interviews and things done at the time period. Side 2 in the rear cover actually gives you the piece on Last Crusade, which is Great Adventurers and Their Quests, which is basically a vintage making-of documentary piece on Last Crusade, done in the same sort of manner. And these are, of course, just treasures for having on-set footage and interviews at the time, and getting that sort of you are there perspective of the actual production. Just like the Raiders documentary, this has PCM audio. It is a better pressing, and of course it's better audio than the expensive and rare US counterpart, but also does have Japanese subtitles. So if that does bother you, you will have to deal with that. But it's a wonderful inclusion in the set, and we should have gotten something like this in the US, and it just never happened. Of course, we get the collectible mail-away card. And then this beautiful booklet, which seems, again, rather simplistic when you get to it, but you open it up, and you have the main cast and crew information with lovely stills and a lot of nice tinting to it to sort of give it a, not otherworldly, but sort of old-timey feel, I guess. This is a beautiful touch, actually including the timeline journey of all three films as if it was the iconic Indiana Jones travel montage. And what this next part, not exactly necessary, but it's the links they went to and presenting this that really is impressive. So here you have a page for each film with the main cast and then the entire cast and crew listing. That's something you just don't see all the time, of not just having, oh, here's the main cast and crew, but they actually took the time to list everyone for all three films. So you can actually come to the program in the booklet and actually read the entire cast and crew. That's incredible. And it's not just like, oh, they're in tiny print. No, they're all printed in here. I didn't know that this was in here until I started flipping through this. Again, that's not something that people or studios do. So this is truly an impressive thing. It's very simple, and I don't think most people would think too much about it, but I just really found that so impressive and respectful to the crew. And then, of course, the rear has the titles and the legal information. So that is the beautiful Japanese Indiana Jones trilogy box. Again, it's one of the beautiful Japanese trilogy exclusive box sets that really make up for the set that we didn't get here in the US. So it's probably about time that we move on to a galaxy far, far away and talk about Star Wars editions, because when do I not talk about Star Wars editions? So to start with, Jason decided that he was going to not only help me finish my Japanese Special Collection editions, but actually just hook me up with the entire trilogy. And so I now have these beautifully minty editions with the Obi strip of the Japanese Special Collection, which is really legendary in Star Wars video realms because this was the first major widescreen release of the trilogy. This is what almost everything was based off of master-wise until the end of the Fox Special widescreen editions, and then we got the Technodisc pressing before the definitive collection came out. These are still amazing ways to experience the trilogy. They don't suffer from the motion smearing or lack of color of the definitive set, or any real tomfoolery in the sound design in terms of messing with the theatrical audio tracks. However, of course, on Star Wars, like most releases, because a lot of them after this point stemmed from the work on this Japanese edition here, this has the 1985 home remix, or as fans like to call it. So this is the 1977 theatrical Dolby Stereo mix, but a bit reduced in terms of dynamic range, and it does add 3PO's tractor beam line from the mono mix. So this is the unique home audio mix that's on almost every video edition from 1985 to 1993 when the definitive collection master took over. This has the beautiful, very simplistic but classy design of the Japanese Special Collection releases with the white cover. It's tricky to get these in good shape because they are in their own individual sleeves in terms of the disc, but they are all housed in a single jacket, and it being in full CAV, it's very easy to get copies like what I have, or what I had before this, that has a beat up spine. Of course, these have their own custom sleeves with the title logo. They are the same for each, just changing the actual numbers of the sides and giving you the little list of chapter stops. And of course, the disc labels themselves are the traditional blue and white CBS Fox. There is a little booklet. It is black and white, but it's nicely done, even though, of course, it's Japanese, and my Japanese is non-existent, so I can just look at the pictures. But it is nicely done, nicely printed, with some good stills in here. Then we come to Empire, which has the beautiful alternate foreign poster artwork, again in the same type of design, in full CAV with Dolby Surround PCM. In this case, for Empire and Jedi, they are pretty much doing versions of the original theatrical Dolby Stereo from the 35mm general releases, so you don't have to worry about a custom home remix like you do on Star Wars. But it's in the same type of design with the lovely inner sleeves for each of the discs. The film is, again, full CAV. This is largely what you're going to see picture-wise for all three films on the Fox Special Widescreen editions here in the US, but those are, of course, CLV, and these do have much better picture quality. Of course, Star Wars has the incredible shrinking ratio problem, which was corrected for the later pressings at the end of that run of that disc. And that's where the rare and wonderful Technodisc version comes into play. But on Empire and Jedi, you don't have to worry about that. And so on Laserdisc, I do think picture-wise, with the exception of the clarity of the much later pressings of the special editions, I do think this is picture-wise probably the best you can do for Empire and Jedi in terms of an relatively unaltered original presentation on home video. And these do have a visual upgrade over even the US special widescreen editions, because again, those are all CLV, and they are based on these Japanese masters. This also has a nice booklet and the same labels, so it follows in suit in terms of the package design as Star Wars. So here is Return of the Jedi in the same package design, also in full CAV with Dolby Surround Stereo PCM. Again, this is the master that was pretty much reused for the US Fox Special Widescreen CLV release, but this has the better quality being full CAV in the same lovely package design. Again, very simple on the surface, but extremely classy and beautiful to look at. Again, each of the discs is in the same custom sleeve, again, full CAV, and then there is the lovely booklet as well, again, in the same sort of design as Star Wars and Empire. So now I am thankfully finally able to complete my Japanese Special Collection trilogy, and I'm so happy that I have all three of these, because these are not the easiest to get a hold of, and any edition of Star Wars these days has gotten much more expensive on video, not necessarily for the right reasons, unfortunately. So I had been wishing that I had gotten all of these years ago before prices really shot up, and a lot of times you do have to wind up importing these from Japan and doing things like slow boat shipping and things. So it's wonderful to finally have all three, and I've loved the one that I had so much for so long that I'd kind of given up hope that I would find inexpensive, cheap, or affordable copies of these unless they just happened to pop up for Empire and Jedi. But never did I think that I would be gifted a beautiful, complete set like this. So this is wonderful. So next, he sent me the Japanese version of the Definitive Collection, which seems at first, oh, that seems very similar to the US version, but as you can see, this is actually its own actual box in terms of this is an actual lift top box instead of being the special textured side box design of the US set. So that means this is actually, it's not going to be quite as beat up as the US version, but there's so many discs in here that it's very heavy, and I would assume most of these are going to have a lot of wear, but you can see this copy is in really nice shape. There's no corner wear whatsoever, and this is a really hefty set. It's hard to hold on camera like this, but it has the same design as the US set, but here it's actually embossed on this rather glossy box type. The logo is on the sides as well, and you get the THX seal. It's even on the top as well. And then the rear has the credits and technical information. So you lift the top off like so, just like you would any Laserdisc lift top box. Then the original OB strip is in here. It's a little crumpled, but obviously once it was taken off the actual box, it's probably, hard to get back on. So it's nicely included in here, so you can see the original OB strip. Then you get to the discs themselves, which are here in this box, and they have a nice die cut area, so you can actually very easily get your fingers on the actual discs that you want and use them, actually pull discs out rather easily. The design, layout, and logos of the actual discs themselves are identical to what you get in the US set, so it's the same simple cover with the same text and everything. There is the technical info. And then you get standard sleeves, but with custom disc labels with the classic font for each film. The films are, of course, CAV and scope widescreen with the Definitive Collection stereo surround 2.0 PCM mixes. This, again, is the Definitive Collection Master. So this is where they first tried to really spiff them up for home video, but unfortunately they did use early forms of digital video noise reduction, which leaves some motion smearing, and the color is a bit drained from the earlier releases, and this became the sort of de facto standard master from 1993 up through until the special editions in 97. This is pretty much how an entire generation experienced the original Star Wars trilogy, was this particular master. And of course, these were infamously reissued as the 2006, what is termed the Gout DVD, where it literally Lucasfilm took the Definitive LaserDisc Master and just put it on an anamorphic DVD. But of course, these have much better audio. However, the audio is a remix for all three films, largely faithful to the original 35mm and even the 70mm release mixes, because this does take elements from the 70mm mixes as well. But it is a custom remix done for home theaters in 1993 in Dolby Surround 2.0, or ProLogic, as it was known at the time. So it's not technically 100% theatrically accurate, but it's relatively close. And these mixes are excellent and still sound great today. In fact, it's one of the last times the original trilogy sounded good, because after this, You had the 97 special edition 5.1 mix, which was great. And then after that, all the releases have had terrible audio and audio presentations. So this is still a great way to experience the films sonically, even if the Picture Master does have baked-in issues of its own. Of course, we have the release of Empire, and this does not suffer the pressing issues of the first release of the U.S. box, where it's missing the bit of layout welding on the Millennium Falcon. So you can get the Japanese box and not have to worry about that. You can also get this Japanese set and not have to worry about laserdisc rot issues, as the U.S. set is very prone to laser rot. So if you want to get a set very easily and know that it is complete and you don't have to worry about rot problems or anything, you can get the Japanese set. But of course, it's a lot harder and usually more expensive, and you usually have to import them. And then here's Return of the Jedi with the same rear design. Of course, these also include the analog track audio commentaries of the US release, which are great, but unfortunately they're rather sparse, and they've never had as much information as one would have wished. However, the Japanese set advances over the US set, just like the indie box, by including the vintage making of documentaries, which were only released separately and are very rare in the US and really don't get reissued all that often, if ever, on modern releases. So this has them all in what is titled a making of trilogy in a beautiful custom gatefold. So this gives you the making of Star Wars, the special effects Empire Strikes Back documentary, and the classic creatures of Return of the Jedi documentary. Now, each of these are presented in their original 4:3 video presentations, but with PCM audio this time, and of course, hard-coded Japanese subtitles. But you get this lovely gatefold of classic stills, but with a nice black and white with a slight blue tinge to the tinting, and they look wonderful. So it's a beautiful gatefold. And then the rear gives you each documentary credits and then just the logos on the bottom. So it's a beautiful inclusion in here. This should have been in the US set without question. And this is a wonderful gatefold presentation. And again, these do all have PCM audio. So this is, I think, the best video presentation of these, certainly the best Laserdisc presentation, and it's a wonderful way to get them all in one place. Once you have everything out, there's a perfect area cut in the bottom of the box to hold the actual booklet, which is the same as what you get in the US release. So it's the exact same dimensions and everything. But of course, all the text is in Japanese. So if you ever wanted to have the definitive collection booklet, but in Japanese, well, you can do that. And then here are the spines for the curious. So that is the Japanese Definitive Collection box. It is a really impressive package to get everything in a lift-top box. It's easy to get discs in and out, actually. But the inclusion of the making of trilogy is really the big draw here. Plus having a rot-free collection without missing footage and not having to look for particular pressings that are complete and rot-free. So I do think this is pretty much the rough equivalent of the US box in terms of the actual the features themselves. If you pop these in, and then if you have the US set like I do, I have done comparisons. It does seem to be relatively the same. I wasn't noticing major differences between the two because, again, they are the same masters. It is the same box set release, just the Japanese version, which went for a different package design and added the making of documentaries as sort of an additional incentive to purchase the box set. So I do think this is a really impressive box, but really the main draw is going to be if you want the exclusive trilogy disc of making of documentaries, and you want the Japanese packaging design and also the benefits of not having to look for a rot-free complete version here in the U.S. of the U.S. set. He also sent me, if that was not enough, I couldn't believe opening these boxes again. It was like Christmas morning. He sent me the 1995 Japanese collector set. This is essentially the Japanese trilogy box of the Faces releases, but with the unique European artwork, but also with another making of bonus. So this is commonly known as the white box, I think, among Laserdisc and Star Wars collectors. This has the original Obi strip still on it. And then the rear has the little photo of each of the covers of the films and the titles, plus the bonus making of documentary, plus the usual credits. It's another lift top box. And then you get to the beautiful covers in here. So these will be very familiar to non-U.S. viewers because this was pretty much the standard art in a lot of territories for what we think of as the Faces releases, with the different character faces being basically represses and standalone issues of the Definitive Collection Masters. This is absolutely gorgeous artwork. I've always loved this particular art trilogy for this era of releases, but it looks beautiful on a Laserdisc jacket. It's obviously sized for different dimensions, so it's got a little bit of aspect ratio bars on the side, but that doesn't detract from the beauty of this. And it even has a nice gatefold too. So you get the same sort of gatefold action that you would get on the US Faces release, and then the custom rear with a sort of blue background to mimic the front. So it's a really lovely looking jacket, and it's also on a nice, thicker, heavier cardstock like a lot of Japanese releases, so it has a very, very premium feel to it. This is CLV, and it's essentially the Japanese version of the U.S. Faces standalone release of Star Wars, and it even includes the infamous George Lucas interview with Leonard Maltin piece that we love, we all grew up watching, that's split over the 3 films. So that's included here as well, which is nice because those aren't always carried over on all releases. Here is the gorgeous Empire Strikes Back cover. Again, with the same matching art and the sort of aspect ratio on bars on each side. Absolutely beautiful on this jacket, I must say. These are so wonderful that they are total display pieces. Get another gatefold. And then the matching rear also with the second part of the Lucas interview. Again, this is pretty much the Japanese printing of the Empire Strikes Back 1995 Faces release that we have here in the U.S., also from the Definitive Collection Master. Then here's Return of the Jedi. Really nice and striking. I love that the color of these, the background sort of blue, matches across all 3, giving them sort of a sort of unified look. Then we have the gatefold as well. And then here is the rear cover with the third part of the Lucas interview, of course. And again, this is pretty much the Japanese printing of the US Faces release of Jedi. But the big draw, of course, to this set is that we got a fancy presentation of the documentary From Star Wars to Jedi, The Making of a Saga. This is the complete hour and 5-minute documentary about the making of all 3 films, done in the process of making Jedi and the sort of promotional period. This is another of the classic documentaries that rarely, if ever, gets reissued, and you do have to kind of track it down. And here in the U.S., it was released on VHS, and it was released on standalone LDs, but not as fancy as this. Plus, in addition to having a beautiful jacket with really nice sturdy cardstock, this of course has PCM audio as well, so you get better sound for the documentary. It does have, of course, hard-coded Japanese subtitles, and it is in 4:3 standard ratio. So it is, I think this was shot on 16mm anyway, like all of these. So the quality is pretty much indicative of the source, but it's wonderful to have this beautiful and lovingly made release just to have the pressing of From Star Wars to Jedi in it. So I don't know why they didn't do this in the definitive Japanese box. I guess they did it as an incentive to have here to make you get this one. Or in any case, it was nice of them to do that for those who just got this set instead of the big definitive box. But if you want all the Star Wars documentaries and the fancy Japanese Laserdisc presentations, you do actually have to have both the definitive box set and this collector's set. So this plus the custom box and the beautiful gatefold jackets of the trilogy, these are the reasons why you want to look at getting the Japanese collector's set. Moving on to the 1997 special editions, which I still have quite a deal of fondness for, because I was still growing up when they came out, and the theatrical reissues. And while a lot of the changes are really unnecessary and unfortunate, they still had really dynamic sound mixes based around the original sound design of the original trilogy releases. And of all the special editions, this is the only one that I can really kind of live with. Plus, it's kind of fallen into obscurity because you do have to get them on VHS or Laserdisc outside of if you somehow got original prints of the special edition from 1997. As I said before, this is, I think, the last time the trilogy actually sounded great. I think after this point, all the releases of the trilogy have terrible audio, and even further remixing and things, and all kinds of sound errors and just awful nonsense in terms of the audio tracks. And these are really wonderful, dynamic, punchy 5.1 mixes meant to really make you grin like an idiot in your home theater. So they do have that sort of fun 1990s, hey, look at me, I'm discrete 5.1 type feel to them, but they still respect the original sound design. So to get to this, he also sent me the Japanese 1997 SE box set. So this has the same artwork and design as what we had here in the US on the VHS release, which actually did have the silver Vader box type design on the letterbox tape set. And interestingly, this actually shares a similar design technique to the VHS release. The Laserdisc didn't have a fancy box set here in the US. We just had the standard slip tray, which I've gone over in my Star Wars Laserdisc videos before. So this has the original baggage, which actually has the Dolby Digital Hype sticker, in addition to the Obi strip. But also, rather interestingly, the actual tape used on these, I wasn't aware of this till seeing it. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but it actually is an actual Star Wars official printed label as the actual tape sealing the back. So that was an unexpected, really interesting, nice touch, I guess. So here, of course, is the Obi strip. Very thick because, of course, it's a box set. So there's the spine and then the rear. Now, this box is pretty much a Laserdisc dimension size version of what you had on the VHS release in terms of the design. It even has the die cut mimicking Vader's helmet. But the spine is really beautiful and intricate and unlike anything we ever had here in the US. Plus, the whole box has a very thick gloss printing quality to it. So it has a very premium feel. The top has the trilogy logo printed on the wonderful silver. Then the back has the new stylized font logos for the titles, plus the custom special edition logo for the trilogy, which I've always loved. This was on, of course, the VHS release. And on the close-up photos, I've got my copy of the US VHS letterbox set, so you can see for direct comparisons between the two packages. However, while that was a slip box, this has the same sort of widescreen logo on the silver, but the actual box itself, you actually pull on old Vader here, and there is a little bit of Velcro, and the whole thing opens. So if you thought you were getting away from Vader, well, no, you're not, because he's still there. And then you actually open the hinge, and the discs are housed inside. And so they're well protected, but it is a little finicky trying to get them in and out. They were nice enough to give us another little die cut area there, but because it's the interior spine, you do kind of want to just lay this flat on a table to slide the discs in and out. And there are foam inserts, so there are, it's a little tight, so you do want to be very careful, but it does very much keep the disc protected, and it does have a very premium quality feel to this. I mean, the construction is really impressive because not only is it intricate, but it is very heavy and sturdy, and definitely the type of stuff you will just not see again ever in home video. Now, I wish I could say the same for the jackets. Unfortunately, though, they decided not to do a gatefold. So while the jackets and the art is beautiful, of course, it's not a gatefold. So these are going to have crumpled corners, and you have to be very careful handling them because they are multiple discs inside of a standard jacket. So these do use the beautiful, iconic Drew Struzan special edition trilogy posters, beautifully printed on a Laserdisc jacket. I don't know why they didn't use this here in the U.S. I think if they had standalones of this as well, like the Faces releases, they would have sold a ton of these, even though Laserdisc was late in its life in terms of its longevity. But again, beautiful to have the wonderful poster art on a Laserdisc jacket with a widescreen banner. But as you can see, because it's not a gatefold, even though it was protected in the box, there is some corner crumpling, and the discs are just inside a single pocket there, which is kind of loose. So you do want to be very careful handling these because it's a thinner sort of standard cardstock. So you can see it kind of when you can flex it with your fingers there. So this is definitely the type of jacket you want to be careful handling because it's very easy to perhaps crease or damage it. Now the rear, you have a shot that gives you that widescreen image to sell that this is a widescreen release, but this is pretty much the same as the rear of the widescreen US VHS tape that I have. So I've got a side-by-side of these so you can see what I'm talking about. Same images, and again, the same sort of layout as what's on the widescreen letterbox tape jacket, but here it's across a whole Laserdisc jacket. Same sort of silver background, but with a nice sort of textured feel that gives a premium sort of quality feel to it. But again, I just thought it was really interesting seeing what I was used to seeing on the VHS tape, the letterbox one, here on an LD jacket. Now, the discs themselves do have a bit of a custom label with Fox and Lucasfilm there. These are, of course, CLV widescreen. They are the same picture master as the US release and have both the 97 mix in Dolby Surround 2.0 PCM and Dolby Digital 5.1 AC3, which is really the way you want to go for the full discrete effects. These also include in each release an insert with the chapter listings, so the 3 CLV sides here with the chapter breakdown, and then on the flip side you get the custom credit list with the poster images for the whole trilogy. Now, we did get this in the US set in the booklet, but they had that has an entire booklet with some write-up and essay and then a chapter credit listing for all 3 films, and the films run on to different sides, one after the other. Whereas here, each film gets its own chapter breakdown in the individual releases. So this is pretty much a box containing what would have been individual releases otherwise. Here is Empire Strikes Back, again following the same sort of design to the letter. Has the beautiful Struzan poster artwork, but again is a single pocket sleeve, so you got to be careful not to ding it up or get any creases on it. The rear, again, is the same as what's on the US letterbox VHS release, and this, of course, carries both 2.0 Dolby Surround Stereo, PCM, and the 5.1 AC3 special edition mix. This also, of course, has the chapter breakdown on the printed insert, and then the back is the trilogy photo again. Then we have Return of the Jedi. Again, same design, the beautiful Struzan poster art. Then the rear, same as the US letterbox VHS release, but on a Laserdisc jacket. Then there are the disc labels. This one actually carries the Dolby Digital explanation insert about the 5.1 system, and the implementation is AC3, but of course all the writing is in Japanese. Here's the chapter listing for Return of the Jedi. And then the trilogy lineup again. And of course, here are the spines. Don't know how well that's going to come across. So that is the Japanese special edition box set. Now that was an amazing enough surprise, but imagine my further astonishment when I found he also sent me the late release Japanese box set, which is the final release and did not have a US equivalent. So this actually carries what was on the final VHS release here in the US, which did have both pan and scan and letterbox versions and was done to match the then ongoing Star Wars prequel releases, which had started with Phantom Menace, and this came out in between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. This does feature the little promo featurette about the making of Attack of the Clones, so that definitely dates it to the early 2000s, 2001 era. That's the primary draw extras-wise of what is on this release, which is otherwise a repackaging of the 1997 special editions. Like the US VHS box set, this is double-sided, so I guess you have the dark side with Vader on the front, and then the light side with 3PO here on the back, of course, white and black. This is still in the shrink wrap, so it has the Obi strip on it, and of course has the spine there. This has the THX seal of approval and everything, but it is basically the 1997 special edition, but on its final Laserdisc pressing. Now, unlike the previous box, they learned from that mistake of making the disc hard to get to, and they just made it a simple open spine design, so you just slide everything out. Unfortunately, they once again decided not to do gatefolds, so you have what's on the US VHS jacket covers, but here across a Laserdisc banner with widescreen and a logo on the bottom. It's an interesting look, and it's definitely weird seeing the final VHS art, but on with Laserdisc dimensions. Definitely, it's obviously showing the trend is already going much more towards Photoshop as opposed to the '97 Drew Struzan posters. So it's interesting seeing this art again, but seeing it on a Laserdisc jacket. That carries over to the rear, which is also sharing the same design, stills, and layout of the final VHS release here in the US. It's, again, 3-sides CLV with the 1997 master of the special edition with the special edition stereo 2.0 surround PCM track and the special edition 5.1 in AC3. So this is basically a trilogy box set repackaging of the 1997 special editions. However, since this came out in 2000, it's always been thought that this had much better picture quality, even though it would seemingly be the same as the 1997 version. This does have custom labels with the final sort of artwork design for the logos. Here's Empire, again with the revised artwork, but on a Laserdisc jacket, the widescreen banner. Again, it's just a single pocket, so you do want to be careful handling these to not damage the jacket. The rear has the same sort of design as the first film, and again, this is all stemming from the final US wave of VHS artwork. And again, these have the custom labels with the new logos. And here's Jedi with the revamped artwork, which is borrowing some, it seems, from the Struzan poster with the widescreen banner again on the bottom. Again, single pocket jacket, and then the matching rear. So these make a nice little uniform set, but I do think the 1997 with the 97 poster art jackets do look a bit better. Also, these have a custom black spine to match what's on, again, stemming from the US VHS releases, and then they all slot in perfectly like that. So that's it in terms of the packaging. It doesn't have a whole lot of fanfare for being the 2000 sort of last gasp final box set of Star Wars, even if it is the special edition only. But it's still a really nice hard shell case, has a nice premium feel to it, and of course, this is the final box set of the trilogy, in special edition or not. This is the final trilogy box set that there is, and it's again really interesting seeing the final US VHS designs replicated on this Laserdisc package. Now, again, this being a 2000 release, the thought has always been that this was technically better than the US and Japanese pressings of the 97 box sets. I have done some comparisons. I am going to be doing a full dedicated review just to more Star Wars on Laserdisc editions and getting more into the nitty gritty of the differences between all of them, if any. With them being the same masters, you're getting into very minute territory, and you're honestly looking more at pressing quality differences in terms of things like video noise and overall quality, in terms of maybe the later pressings might have a little bit more sharpness, but sometimes Japanese releases can have different brightness levels and things. So there's all kinds of little things like that, but you're really having to start to scrutinize very closely. Again, on the basic comparisons I've already done on these, I do think this does seem a bit better, perhaps, than even both of the 1997 box sets. But I do think the U.S. box set does have a little bit less noise than some of the Japanese ones on certain sides at certain points. But again, I'm going to do really detailed comparisons between all three and all of these new additions that I have to my collection to further update my Star Wars on Laserdisc video. So again, it's never an easy matter of, oh, this one is 2000 and came out last, so obviously it's got the best picture quality. That's not necessarily always true, particularly in the analog realm of Laserdisc, where all kinds of factors can exist, and until you actually pop the disc in and you start going frame by frame and comparing different discs going frame by frame, you're not necessarily going to get all the ins and outs of the nuances and the differences of each pressing. So from the initial comparisons I've done, I do think this is a really impressive release, and again, it is the final Star Wars box set release from 2000. But I don't think it's head and shoulders, oh my gosh, this is so much better than the 1997 pressings. They're all very close between the three. So don't go crazy trying to find this very final pressing thinking it's going to be the end all be all, simply because it's the final, latest, and last pressing. That doesn't always necessarily mean it is the best pressing, but again, I am going to do a detailed comparison and update to my Star Wars on Laserdisc video once I get more detailed comparisons done. And then to close out, I wanted to focus on the James Bond titles that he sent me. This first one is one I've always wanted to look at, but it's a rather interesting case because this is the 1995 Japanese release of Goldfinger, which is sort of straddling the fence between being their version of the Goldfinger CAV Deluxe box set that MGM did and the final release THX editions, which of course use this artwork for Goldfinger, because this was designed for originally the VHS releases here, and then carried over to the THX LaserDisc and the DVDs and so on. So this is really interesting because it sort of straddles the fence between all of those, and it has the James Bond 007 collection banner on the top from the 1995 US James Bond 007 collection VHS series that originated this art. So it's really interesting how it has elements of all of those releases. So we have the Obi strip here, which I'll remove. It's yellow. Traditionally, that is the color of James Bond Obies, particularly for pretty much for the letterbox editions. Then here is the jacket. We have a wonderful gatefold, which is really nice because it's black, white, and red, and the red really pops on the gatefolds, particularly with the text and then the shot of Connery there from the pre-title sequence. Of course, unfortunately, the text is in Japanese, and I can't read Japanese, but still, it's a really nice-looking gatefold. We get custom labels with the 007 logo. Then the back has the gun barrel logo like all of the Japanese letterbox Bond releases, but of course, if you look closely, that's the 90s typical blanked out logo, but if you look closely, that's obviously Timothy Dalton, his posing there. That's actually Dalton himself in there. But this, interestingly, while it looks on the back like a standard letterbox release, this is sort of like a condensed version of the box set, because Disc 1 is the film in CLV from the restored box set master with mono PCM, and then Disc 2 goes into the making of documentaries that were done for the box set. So this is basically the CAV box set, but shrunk down to a single CLV gatefold release. But the packaging is sort of like a cross between the Japanese letterbox editions, then the final THX run of standalone movie-only releases, and also taking elements from the US VHS mid-90s release and 007 collection. So it's really an interesting release. It even has a custom spine, and it even says the James Bond collection as part of the title. So I'm sure this was the type of design that might have come up here in the US with the final planned special edition releases that never were. After they did the box sets, there were supposed to be deluxe releases with the documentaries for each of the films, and that never came to pass. And eventually, once those got canceled and scrapped, they eventually became the special edition DVD sets. So I'm thinking kind of what they may have thought of doing, perhaps at MGMUA at the time, was with these final Laserdiscs is not necessarily doing box sets for every film, but perhaps doing gatefolds like this with the documentaries thrown in if they weren't going for the full CAV box set treatment for all the films. So this is a sort of interesting middle ground between all of those, and a fascinating piece of Bond video history because it's really kind of unique in that way. Of course, I saved the best for last. This is the one I alluded to at the start of the video. This is the one that I've discussed on the Wolfpack podcast and on Twitter before, because I about fell over when I opened the box and this was in there, and he did not tell me he was sending me this. This is the most gracious and kind and unbelievably giving and thoughtful gift I've ever gotten, because he sent me The World Is Not Enough. This has been at the top of my Laserdisc wish list ever since I started even looking at Laserdisc. The first thing I did when I found out about the Laserdisc database and things like that and the format, the very first thing I did was, of course, look up how many James Bond films came out on the format, and of course found out that The World's Not Enough was the final film, and it was Japanese only, and came out in that sort of final wave of Japanese exclusive releases that are extremely collectible, extremely pricey and valuable. And so I pretty much just always wrote that off in my head as that sort of unobtainium category of I would probably never find one of these or never be able to afford one of these. I've come close many times. I've been outbid many times. I've looked at proxy auctions. It's been a long sort of quest, because this is my sort of white whale of Laserdisc collecting. This has been my Grail. This is the one disc that I always wanted, never thought I would get. And this is the only Laserdisc I would ever consider paying a crazy amount for, not the usual in sort of insane high cost it goes for in the hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but trying to find maybe a more affordable one. And of course, when people stumble across this and then resell it for crazy amounts, it really killed me. And I have reviewed this before. Peter Biancardi loaned me his copy a number of years ago, and so I reviewed it on this channel and then had to go through the agony of mailing it back. So it's like, well, I got to hold it once and I get to play it once, and of course I've experienced the Laserdisc, I could think or say to people, but I don't actually own it. I had to send it back. So this is the most generous gift I have ever gotten from anyone ever. I'm still speechless. So I cannot. Jason, this is amazing. I am so. I mean, even just. I still can't believe it. So just to go over this very quickly, which I did in the original review I did back when I was able to review the loaner copy from Peter. But of course, we have the jacket itself, which has the international art. Obviously, I guess, copied over from sort of VHS type design. We have the sort of aspect ratio protection bars on the side, but interestingly, they have the sort of global blueprint layout, which is all in the international poster artwork. So it does really fit, even though it's not using the whole of the whole entirety of the Laserdisc jacket. We have the spine, which is rather plain and just white, with the catalog number and the title in Japanese. Here is the gatefold, which of course is in black and white, which is, it looks nice, but one would wish that it was in color. But interestingly, this does use the shot of Pierce Brosnan that's from the U.S. release poster. Then here is the rear. The film is over 3 sides, CLV with 2.0 PCM Dolby Stereo surround. This is obviously the 2.0 SR mix from the theatrical release and was also on the VHS release and is exclusive to the VHS and the Laserdisc because after this it was dropped for later releases. But this has the all-important 5.1 Dolby EX AC3 track. This was the first James Bond film to be mixed in a discrete format with rear center info. So the first James Bond film in the new Dolby EX format. This would continue on to Die Another Day as well, having specific sound design formats like that. So this is actually a 5.1 EX track on the AC3. I have, of course, watched this before for the review I did, and the 5.1 seemed pretty much the same as what's on the special edition DVD here, which also has that EX, but you do have to manually activate it in your receiver. It is not flagged. However, the main draw of this in terms of exclusive stuff is the fact that the Laserdisc transfer has a little bit different color timing to what's on the SE DVD, which does seem to be the same sort of video master. And while this is a little bit softer, it is still an extraordinarily impressive Laserdisc. Definitely, picture-wise, one of the best Laserdiscs that you can actually get. It is very much in that sort of top-tier category, but the color timing does seem to suggest more of a sort of filmic look in places, as opposed to its DVD counterpart, which does seem to have some over-sharpening and edge enhancement and things like a lot of early DVDs. But when you then go on to later releases and even looking at the 1080p Blu-ray, the Laserdisc does actually kind of look a bit more like the Blu-ray in terms of color timing, but it still is a bit unique. It's a little bit different. So the Laserdisc presentation is a little bit unique in terms of the color timing, and I can't wait to spin this up and watch it again and again and again and again, because I still can't believe I now have the ability to do that on the Japanese Laserdisc. Of course, this does have Japanese hard-coded subtitles. However, because it's a scope film, you can mask them out for the most part. They don't really creep into the image all that much, outside of maybe a stray letter or two. The disc labels themselves are pretty simple, but have the custom 007 logo on the blue and white MGM Home Entertainment banner. So once again, this is just, I am still flabbergasted and amazed, and of course I had to save this for last. So just an absolutely super ultra beyond generous gift. I never expected to ever receive anything for starting this channel. I was amazed when people actually started watching and liking and subscribing and commenting on the videos and things. So every little bit of support helps and encourages me to keep these efforts going and keep this channel going. But this is just, I mean, this whole just amazing assortment of Laserdiscs that I was sent, but this in particular, to actually be given a copy of The World's Not Enough, I'm just still, I am beyond, it's beyond words. So I cannot express my extreme gratitude. So once again, this entire video and everything in it, I must give my deepest thanks to Jason Koestner. These are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for these. I am still, any one of these would have been amazing, let alone a couple of these, but all of these, and then actually sending and including the Japanese pressing of The World's Not Enough is just, oh my gosh, this is literally, it was like Christmas morning, but far beyond any I have ever had. I mean, the fact that these felt practically curated for my sort of top tier unobtainium wish list titles of the format, but this alone, I can't believe it. Still, I'm still amazed and flabbergasted and beyond thankful. So thank you ever so much for these. So that's another reason why I wanted to make this video, and I knew I had to give these their own time in the spotlight in terms of a Laserdisc collection video. And as I said, this is literally the most impressive and amazing and important collection update I've ever done, because I never thought I would get even half of these titles, but in particular, finally having this guy in my hands, it's just unbelievable, because I've wanted to get this on this particular Laserdisc since I got into the format back in, like, really hot and heavy, probably 2008, 2009. That was when I was really starting to dive into Laserdisc and look at all what titles were available. And back when I was buying my first James Bond Laserdisc, which were the first Laserdiscs I ever bought. So, from that journey all the way to here, and beyond from this point. But I'm still just absolutely blown away. So that's it for this particular Laserdisc collection update video. Again, I'm just still flabbergasted at the generosity here. So I'm going to do a detailed video review and further detailed video on the Star Wars Laserdisc that I have here now, again, to supplement and update my original video. And I'm definitely going to be doing something about this guy here, because I need to go back and look at what I said. I actually rewatched the video I made way back when I got to review Peter Biancardi's copy. But I'm definitely going to do a piece on this guy, because I have to. I didn't know if I was ever going to actually get to watch this again. So that in terms of the actual Laserdisc pressing. So this is truly amazing. So once again, my absolute deepest thanks, and hopefully other fellow Laserdisc collectors out there can spread the love of the format more. If you have spares or things people would really love, it definitely, to say it brightens up your mailbox and it brightens up your day to get a care package, but it's definitely an understatement. But I have never gotten a care package like this, and it was several boxes. So and again, it was like Christmas morning. I didn't know what was going to be in there, so I'm still just, I never thought I would open a box and find this guy inside. So I know I'm babbling at this point, but I can't help it. So as always, I hope this has been at least somewhat fun and informative to hear me once again babble on about classic films and talk about Laserdisc and all the wonderful intricacies of the format that we love. And as always, keep your discs spinning, keep your players going, keep the format alive, and thanks ever so much for watching.